Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your gracious host, Melissa Goller, and I am excited to air my show on the GSMC Network. I love podcasts, and I love film. After all, I write them, and I get them made. Combining those two things be the basis for a show that I want should appeal to cinephiles all the world over. This will be a show where we discuss great films, no matter how big or small. A show where we dive deep into how the elements in the cosmos came together to make them great. And a show where we will never be afraid to get creative. Let's do this. In addition, I am excited to showcase up-and-coming writers putting out good stories who deserve to be in the spotlight. Stay tuned for that at a later date. Today's episode is part 2 of the 2021 Academy Award nominated live-action short films. I'll be giving my thoughts on the remaining 3 films in this category. They are The Letter Room, Feeling Through, and White Eye. In this first segment, I'll start with The Letter Room. The Letter Room follows a prison corrections officer, his name is Richard, who was promoted to a human resources position to work as the director of prisoner communications. Thinking he's going to make a difference in the inmates' lives by bringing in different types of therapies and help, like animal therapy, he even mentions. He instead is censoring the mail that the inmates receive. His job is to open the envelopes, make sure that the paper inside is paper and only paper, and that no contraband, drugs, or what they call terrorist materials have been snuck in. And when I say paper and only paper, it's because the warden even mentions an incident where someone had crushed drugs and steam them onto the paper that they wrote the letter on. I mean, we got to applaud creativity here, don't we? It's ingenious. He scans the letters onto the computers and reads them to make sure they're harmless. The first are regular happy birthdays. Some discuss their day-to-day errands, the run-ins they had in the bank, and some are drawings that children made for their parents. Richard then finds a love letter addressed to someone named Chris from a woman named Rosita. She expresses her deep, unwavering love for Chris, thinking about him every second, and how she counts down every second until they could be reunited. And Richard is noticeably moved. When Richard delivers Chris the letter, it is revealed Chris is on death row. Richard becomes more and more interested in these letters that Rosita is sending Chris every week. They are beautifully written in a pretty feminine handwriting. They are heartbreakingly romantic when she expresses how painfully in love she is, like only the greats in literary history have been able to do before. I mean, I'm talking like Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, Shakespeare, or Tolstoy. Rosita writes, "You are all the beams of sunshine that ever touch my skin. I can recall your touch in seconds." I mean, that sounds very similar to the classic. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief. Any excuse to quote Shakespeare in any context, whether it's relevant or not, I am here for. You'll learn that as we go on with the show. Anyway, I think Rosita read Act 2, Scene 2 of Romeo and Juliet and got a little inspired. Rosita's letters get a little, not safe for work, if you will, as a girlfriend would write to her boyfriend. And it gets to Richard a little. He has a little reaction. That scene makes the audience ask the big question, the big dramatic question in every story. What's going on? Who is Richard, and why is he into these letters? Is he lonely? Is he a sucker for romance who loves love? Or is he a nosy pervert getting involved in other people's life and business to make up for a lack of his own relationship? Or, it can go on, but the last question that I had is Richard developing feelings for Rosita through these letters? And also, you can go in another direction and ask, who's Chris? So much has been said about Chris. We have yet to even meet him. Who is Chris? Halfway through the film, that question is answered. Around the 15 minutes mark, we get more Chris shots as he goes to his exoneration hearing, which you see is not successful. The next letter from Rosita provides the inciting incident of the film that thrusts Richard into the main action of the story. Following Chris's failed exoneration hearing, it was most likely his last one before his execution. Rosita suggests she would take pills and commit suicide after his death in order for them to finally be together on the other side, as she says. It's an us against the world theme, and this is our only chance to be together. Richard is distraught when he reads that letter. He's even asking his warden if there's a type of protocol that they have to help people on the outside. And she's just really confused. She's like, what? All we're concerned about is the people inside, not the people outside. It just shows that he genuinely cares about this woman he's never met. He decides to visit Rosita to confront her. When he arrives, we discover that Rosita is pregnant and with another man. The two talk, and Rosita reveals she has been writing how much she misses Chris in these letters in order to comfort him. If she's suffering, and if she reassures him that she's still committed to him no matter what, then he'll feel better. And that's why she won't visit him or come to the execution like he asked her to. She doesn't want him to see her pregnant. Richard and Rosita's exchange ends, and then the film does too. From my takeaway, there are 4 people that we as an audience are told to care about. Everything in this film is nondescript. The location, other than that it all takes place in a prison, is not important. I don't know what state or city they are in. Honestly, though, I thought I saw a New York license plate, but that could just be me and my strange affinity for my home, where I think anywhere could look like New York if the lighting is bad enough, we'll say. I also know nothing about the 4 characters that I'm getting into. I don't know their last names other than a few key facts. And they are: number 1, Chris is in prison for killing a police officer. How many is not clear, nor is the reason. The other guards just refer to him as a cop killer. He has been on death row for 7 years. His most recent, and what feels like the last, exoneration hearing was not successful, solidifying his fate. Fact number 2. Rosita and Chris were together before Chris's incarceration. She calls him the love of her life. At some point during the last 7 years, Rosita has found a new man and is pregnant, though she has never abandoned Chris. But again, she will not tell him about this relationship so as not to upset him. There's no point. What good will that do? She does miss Chris, genuinely. It's a terrible situation. And she writes how she'd be willing to commit suicide by pills after his death. Even if it's all hyperbole, she is loyal to him. And that's for real. A classic doomed, star-crossed lover's tale, if you will. Number 3 is about someone I haven't mentioned yet. Another inmate named Jackson Hayes, the only last name we get. The movie opens up with Richard leading Hayes for his designated time outside in the prison's basketball courts. Hayes likes to play basketball, do push-ups, and prefers a book over the movie version anytime, and loves to discuss the finer points in literature that a movie might not have shown. He seems really sweet, and him and Richard have a nice rapport. It is revealed that he too is on death row for unknown reasons, but that is enough of a blow to the audience because I was immediately rooting for Hayes once I met him, and this reveal was heartbreaking. Hayes needs Richard to look into the prison mail system for letters from his daughter that he believes were being hidden by the guy who worked that job before and was doing that out of spite. Hayes hasn't heard from his daughter in 2 years and wants to know why. We know why, just as we know there aren't any letters. Lastly, fact number 4. Richard. Richard cares about his job and the people he works with. It is seen in his motivation to work for the prison human resources in the first place. He wants to bring alternative therapies and forms of help to the inmates. Like I said, he quotes an article about animal therapy. It's shut down immediately, unfortunately, as would be expected. Instead, Richard gets put behind a desk in a small windowless office to censor letters. He still makes the best of it, handing inmates their only correspondence with the outside world. That eases their fear of being forgotten and proves that someone out there misses them and thinks about them is definitely not nothing. To lift someone's spirits in the type of place that they are in is heroic, really. But you see a contrast to this satisfaction with Richard because he doesn't have that joy in his personal life. He lives alone, eats alone, and does mostly everything else alone. He develops a pseudo-connection with Rosita, a woman expressing her love to a man. Why can't he be that man in his head? She doesn't know him. He can pretend the letters are written for him. He gets angry that Chris won't answer Rosita's letters. How can he be ungrateful when someone loves him like that? In his rage, he tells Hayes in the neighboring cell that there are no letters from his daughter. She doesn't want to talk to him. Stop bothering him. He seems unaffected by Rosita admitting she writes Chris to make him feel better, and assures him she won't kill herself. This satisfies him, and their correspondence ends. The film ends with Richard writing a letter to Hayes in the voice of his daughter and apologizes to him for not finding the letter sooner. Hayes is fully aware that Richard wrote it, but appreciates the gesture nonetheless. The film ends after that scene between Richard and Hayes. Written and directed by Elvira Lind, The Letter Room was nominated for Best Short Film at the Palm Springs International Short Fest and at the Tribeca Film Festival. Other festivals include the Telluride Film Festival and the Holly Shorts Film Festival, where it was nominated as part of the official selection. The film stars Oscar Isaac as Richard, easily one of the top 100 influential actors of today. Oscar Isaac, previously known from his work of Inside Llewyn Davis, A Most Violent Year, and my favorite, Ex Machina. He adds a lot of depth to a character that we are not given a lot of information about. He still evokes sympathy from us and makes us curious as to what he will do next, which is a minimum requirement for any actor playing any role. Safe to say, Oscar Isaac knows what he's doing. It's important to mention that the writer, director, and producer of The Letter Room, Elvira Lind, is Oscar Isaac's wife. So together they collaborated on the film, on its direction and nuances, and what choices he should make, or what choices she should make. Step aside Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, am I right? So that close connection between the two frontrunners of the film creates a fluidity that was easy to watch and makes the film flow pretty seamlessly from one scene to the next and not leave a lot of questions in the end. When the film ends, it ends. It showed a moment in these characters' lives without a big tie it all up, make it make sense moment in the end. People met, people talked, people left and went home. Did all these people, namely Richard and Rosita, need to meet? I don't know. But they did, and it was fine. That's my take. It happened. It could have also not happened, and maybe that would have been okay for the sake of the story. Maybe Richard and Chris should have interacted more and leave Rosita to remain this mystery girl, hopelessly yearning for a man she can't have, with words of affection written so tenderly you can't forget them. To have not ever met Rosita, but to constantly think about her anyway, could have been an interesting direction. But Lind chose to reveal her. It takes away very little dimension and complexities. Because before meeting Rosita, I was building her up in my head, and the expectations were not 100% reached. But that's me. Maybe you thought differently. With prison-themed shows and movies all the rage, guards are not always depicted in a great light. Did you see Orange is the New Black Season 5 Prison Riot? Case in point. Lind chose to show Richard as an emotional, objective, and caring man. Someone not discouraged by the bureaucracy. and still wanting to implement change, which I think is exactly the type of person who should be working in a prison. He goes out of his way to stop Rosita from what he thinks is going to be a suicide. And he doesn't know her. He's doing it from the bottom of his heart. And that's nice. I just hope he does the same for the people he actually works for. But I do think he does, because of the letter he writes to Hayes to lift his spirits and right a wrong. You see Richard pass by other inmates in the prison, and he's always acknowledging them with kindness and treating them like fellow human beings. As I mentioned, the location of this film is not determined. I don't know where Richard lives or works, but I don't have to. The setting isn't important when it's a story about people, when it's so character-driven that where they live wouldn't change that. This is different from the first two films I mentioned in part one that really needed to show where these people live to tell the story. In the present, the director needed to show they lived in the West Bank because that was the antagonist and the root of their problems. The story wouldn't make sense anywhere else in the world. In Two Distant Strangers, it reflected a problem a group of Americans face specifically, so they need to show it was in America. And where more obvious, consequential, and to some people stressful than New York City. All in all, The Letter Room is a really nicely made film that makes you feel okay by the end of it, which is better than feeling bad. And it really takes you on an emotional journey that Richard himself goes through. And it's streaming on Amazon for anyone interested. Stay tuned for segment 2, where I will discuss the next film, Feeling Through.
Want to know the latest and hottest music hitting the airwaves? Don't be left out. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Music Podcast. It keeps you on the loop with everything you need to know from pop, rock, hip-hop, and the top 40. And we'll throw in news of your favorite artists, concert and tour dates, and so much more. Listen no further, because this is the gold standard in music podcast.
Welcome back. In the last segment, I discussed The Letter Room, and now I'd like to introduce the next film, Feeling Through. Oh my goodness. What a film. I'm so glad I watched it, and I'm so glad it exists, period. It's what a film should be. Nice people, hard-hitting, and restores all my hope in humanity by the end. A quick synopsis is a young homeless teen named Tariq is looking to find a place to crash for the night. He texts multiple people before running into friends. They hang out, listen to music, smoke a little, act like typical teenage boys. But they get a call from their parents to go home. So they leave. And Tariq is left to his own devices again. I would assume that no one knows that he is homeless. He doesn't say it, but people that he's texting aren't really understanding. They think he's just trying to not be where he's supposed to and staying at people's homes just to avoid like being where he needs to be. Anyway, Tariq is left alone when his friends leave, and he has to ponder his next move. Doing so, he walks by a man holding a sign that reads, "I am a deaf, blind man. Tap me if you can help me cross the street," in order for him to get to the bus stop that he needs to be at. Let me tell you, it's 1:30 in the morning, which is a vulnerable time for anyone to be out alone, especially, a minor who is homeless and a deaf, blind man forced to rely completely on strangers. Tariq gently guides him to the bus stop, and we learn his name is Artie. Tariq communicates with Artie by tapping against him to count numbers and spelling out words with his fingers on his palm to answer questions Artie writes out on a notepad, which all appear as subtitles on the screen. And that's that. No verbal dialogue. Tariq sits with Artie to wait for the bus, with a short side trip to a convenience store known as bodegas in New York City. Tariq pulls cash out of Artie's wallet to pay for his drink and takes out a $10 bill for himself, much to the judgment of the convenience store cashier. The bus they were waiting for passes during their trip, and the two fall asleep on the bench waiting for the next. Tariq is jolted awake, reading a text from someone he was relying on to open their home to him, that they are not going to wait for him anymore if he doesn't come over immediately. Tariq can stay with Artie or go to the place that's offering him a bed for the night. Tariq makes the decision to stay, and he reads Artie's notepad to discover he probably spent his evening with an escort and afterwards asked other passerbyers for directions, showing Tariq was not the first person Artie asked for help that night. He was just the first to respond. When the bus arrives, Tariq helps Artie on and implores that the bus driver tap him when they get to his stop. He won't accept a half-sincere, blowing off sort of answer. He wants this bus driver to refer to Artie by his name and put the effort into tapping him when they get to his destination, so he can get home too. With a little hesitation, probably from the uncertainty of what the rest of the night holds, or if they'll even see each other again, Tariq steps off the bus and walks in the opposite direction. As he goes, he passes a homeless man sleeping on the street. Tariq gives him the $10 bill, and the film ends. Wow. I gave this film a standing ovation from my home, and I was alone. I was just so moved. I was moved because this film is transcendent. It forms a connection between two people with different needs, each in a different situation from each other, whose paths wouldn't normally cross. But they do that night, and their lives are changed forever. It doesn't need a lot. It literally has only two actors sitting at a bus stop the whole 18 minutes of the film, with a short scene in the bodega. Feeling Through, aptly named by the way, was written and directed by Doug Rowland and stars Stephen Prescott as Tariq and Robert Tarango as Artie. It was executive produced by Academy Award-winning real-life deaf actress Marlee Matlin. But not initially. They made this film on their own. Roland approached Matlin post-production, where she agreed to see the rough cut. She fell in love with it for a myriad of reasons we'll delve into in a second, and knew she had to be a part of this film. I think we would all want to have a hand in making of this film. Roland came up with this concept for his film when this actually happened to him. He was coming home late from the East Village when he encountered a man holding up a sign that read, "I'm a deaf-blind man and need help crossing the street." He tried his best and it worked out, and he was forever changed by this, knowing he had to put this all down and represent this experience as a film. Roland reached out to the Helen Keller National Center for the Deaf to help in finding a blind deaf person to play Artie. Let me just say the mere fact that Roland insisted on being authentic this way is what led to the beauty of the film. They interviewed candidates from all over the country, in person and over video chat. An interpreter was needed to communicate what Doug said and what the potential actor would say. And what I learned is interpreters are not direct translations. They are really just trying to get the meaning and the essence when words cannot be said. They found Robert eventually. Do you know where he was? Do you know where Robert was the whole time? Robert was working at the Helen Keller Institute. Where in the Helen Keller Institute? He was working in the kitchen. When they spoke to Robert, he was funny, excitable, and even said he loved to be on camera. That kind of dynamic personality definitely was captured on camera. Robert was born deaf, but didn't start to lose his vision until his 30s. He still has slight vision, though, so is only legally blind. So he made a point to mention that he isn't blind, but playing someone who is. And that is acting 101 right there. I am an actor first. It's where I started, and it's the actor's mindset and preparation that led me to transition into writing. I write my characters how I would act out their scenes. What's a meaty thing for an actor to do or say? And I'll write it down. And how would I define acting, quote unquote? For me, acting is all emotional. It's the emotional response to what you see and hear and the feelings those things stir inside you. I personally never thought about what the dramatic preparation would be like if the senses I had to provide me with hearing and seeing were no longer an option. Of course, living day-to-day life is a whole other conversation. But for acting itself, it's hard enough to tap into what you're supposed to in general. But with those added elements, man, it's amazing. What's also amazing is Robert had the discernment to say he's not, completely blind, but playing someone who is. So that's going to take some, acting to get it right, because he wants to be authentic. It's fantastic. It really is when you see it play out on screen. Maybe Robert was born to do this. And I hope he is seen more in this industry, because casting him in this film made him the first deaf-blind actor ever. And I am insanely jealous of him already at how good he was. Feeling Through as a film focuses on two people who are trying to get home, and one happens to be blind and deaf. That's it. It creates a slight hurdle for Tariq to jump over in terms of learning to communicate and get his. get his thoughts across and cater to Artie's needs. But once he does, he and Artie communicate as normally as you and I would. The film doesn't focus on the disability. It acknowledges it, but still portrays Artie as a person waiting for a bus like any of us would. And that's the difference. Everyone keeps their humanity. It's that aspect of the film that drew Marlee Matlin to want to get involved, because she herself has had to overcome so much to make a career for herself as a deaf woman. She won an Academy Award in 1986 for her performance in Children of a Lesser God, in which she played a deaf girl. You should watch it. It's a fantastic, fantastic movie. She's the only deaf actress to win, and she's the most well-known. She has said that people at the time believed she won her Oscar out of pity, and that since she is deaf, and so was her character, then how is that really acting? Matlin has been trailblazing for accuracy and representation in films. And she signed on to this film because it does that very thing. With her behind it, Feeling Through is the little film that could. It's not on streaming services like the 3 other films I have mentioned so far. I found it for free on YouTube. No one well-known stars in it. Its budget was, get this, $3,200. It won awards at modest film festivals only. And yet, here it is, standing alongside other, bigger, better funded, and better supported nominees as an Academy Award nominated short film. I really hope it wins. Stay tuned as I bring up our 3rd and final movie, or 5th and final movie, White Eye.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. In the last segment, I analyzed the film Feeling Through, and in this segment, I would like to introduce our final live-action short film nominated for 2021 Academy Award, White Eye. White Eye follows Omer Atitias, a young Israeli man walking the streets of a seedy urban area in Tel Aviv, when he comes across a bicycle he's convinced is his that was stolen a month ago. It's chained up to a post when he finds it. After grabbing at it and trying to pull it off, he calls the police. They are of no help to him, as Omer hasn't filed an official complaint. Omer finds a locksmith, but the police arrive moments before the metallic operation and threaten them, saying it's illegal to tamper with a stolen item under investigation. Omer makes a scene and enters a nearby meatpacking plant, where he singles out each employee in order to identify a potential thief. Just picture this. He barges into someone else's business and starts pointing fingers at everybody working there, thinking that he has the authority to just disrupt their work like that. Seemingly not understanding the humiliation he's inflicting on the factory's workers, all of whom are African immigrants. The plant manager, Michelle, finally comes out and addresses the fuss Omer is making and demands he leaves. He points to a worker, Eunice, that he believes stole the bike, and the three exit to the street to discuss it. I say discuss lightly. There's a lot of yelling. Eunice, the accused, explains he bought the bike from someone for 250 Israeli currency, shekels, which is around $75. Omer paid $2,000, which is about $615, and demands it back right now. Michelle is trying to mediate, vouching for Eunice's character. She knows he wouldn't do this, she says. Eunice uses the bike for his 2-hour round-trip commute to work to support his wife and daughter. It's literally all he has. He agrees to give Omer back the bike if Omer pays the $250 that Eunice paid for it. Omer responds by calling the police again. Eunice starts to plead with him that they could settle this on their own, but he needs the money. It's plain and simple. It's the only way. Omer, enraged, isn't listening to anything he says. The police arrive and don't hesitate to corner Eunice, demanding to see his visa. We discover in the film's climax that the visa expired 4 months ago. Without hesitation, the police take Eunice into the car. Omer realizes things are about to hit the fan at this point. Things are getting real and out of the realm of anything he could have expected. Omer pleads with the officer not to deport Eunice. Michelle chastises Omer for starting an insurmountable amount of trouble over roughly $75. Omer wants to pay the money now, his last attempt to settle this. He walks through the factory to get to the closest ATM, only to find the other factory workers hiding in a freezer to avoid the police. It's the most significant visual in the movie. The plight of immigrants, the desperation, the need to blend and not be questioned and bring attention to yourself. It's heartbreaking for me just to get out. When Omer returns, the police, Michelle, and Eunice are gone. He's left to stare at an empty street corner and stew in his juices, soured by now, no doubt. Shell-shocked, Omer saws the bicycle in half. It's no longer able to be claimed by anyone now, and leaves it on the street. It's such a waste and a shame. The film ends there. A lot to unpack and process here, I know. Omer is at a point in his life where he indicates that he's been stepped on and taken advantage of by everyone he meets. When he sees the bike, he's reminded of the defeat, and he'll be damned if he lets the bike thief win again. And everyone who has ever done him wrong will learn from him in this moment that he isn't one to be messed with anymore. That a vengeful need to restore his pride, however, will cost another man his safety, livelihood, and send him back to a life of hellish brutality. It's sort of the wrong time to start advocating for yourself. You should have done it in a moment of lesser consequences. Omer's justice crusade, I think you can call it a crusade, created an avalanche. He's causing someone's deportation, and for a wife and daughter to be without their provider. The change of heart he has in the end is too late. Once this type of thing is exposed, it can't reverse itself into the shadows it sought protection from. That's not how it works. Omer can afford another bike. He's always changing his cell phone when the newest one comes out. He probably has a very nice apartment. He doesn't live in this area that his bike was found in. But his principles, which are arguable, screw up his judgment. You die alone on the hill you climb up on, right? No one wins. Michelle attempted to at least mediate the situation. She was explaining to Younes what a receipt was when he didn't know what that is. Because when the police arrive the second time Omer calls them, Omer becomes the one that they were doubtful of initially to the one that they believe. As soon as they see Younes, they think Younes did it and that Omer is the victim. And she's trying to negotiate with them, saying they can't treat him like this. He has a lawyer. I have a lawyer who deals with these situations. At least Michelle was coming to the defense of another human being. Omer was defending materialistic value, that is money. No one wins. I found it interesting that the police wouldn't respond to a stolen bike when Omer hadn't filed an initial claim, but didn't hesitate under the guise of bureaucracy to force a man into their car to check his papers. Younes is from Eritrea, a country in East Africa that has been under the same authoritarian leader since 1993. So you know that freedom of speech and movement are obviously going to be non-existent. The military is always ready to control any given situation and oppress anyone speaking out against them. Omer undoubtedly sent Younes back to that life. From a filmmaking standpoint, I love that this film was shot in one take. In doing so, you as an audience really feel the frenzy of the situation. You feel the craziness going on from the lack of thought that dictates Omer's actions. We are witnessing the situation unfold in real time and unedited. We get the uncomfortable feeling of being there, but we can't do anything to help. And that's painful. Really, really painful. Because you can see the car crash happening, but you can't grab the wheel of the car and turn it around quickly to avoid catastrophe. It's going to happen. It's going to crash. Logistically, can I say this is so hard to do, and it takes very thorough and immense planning. Oneers, as these type of scenes are called, requires each movement done by anyone on and off camera to be well planned and orchestrated to a T. Every detail is considered to make a shot look so messy, for lack of a better word. A lot of planning goes into shots made to look spontaneous. this 20-minute scene, essentially it is a one long scene that lasted 20 minutes. It took 4 months of planning and staging. Facial expressions and body language have to be capitalized in the shooting style because you might not always see them speaking. It's a lot of call and response or action and reaction. And in the end, it allows our heroes to go from complex beings to people bleeding and wounded real fast. This film is 20 minutes, as I said, but Omer's life is changed forever. Breaking the bike in half represents a now broken life. And whose life? Well, Yunus primarily. He is at the disadvantage. But probably Omer's too. Should he remember this moment, that is, when he came to a fork in the road and chose wrong. I think he will remember it. I don't think you can forget it. You might have began that evening rather selfish and entitled and really just letting your life revolve around you and thinking that the world revolves around you and that not much will happen to you. But at the end of something like this, you are shifted in your thinking critically forever. And I think that Omer realizes that, and I don't think he will return to the ways that he was before. Written and directed by Tomer Shushan, White Eye played in more than 80 festivals and won over 25 awards, including the Narrative Short Jury Award at the South by Southwest Film Festival, which is such a cool festival. I think it's a lot cooler than me and will never invite me to go. But here's hoping. The production team had a budget to cover only one night of filming. Can you imagine? They began at 4 p.m. and continued until sunrise at 5 a.m. the next morning. According to Shushan, they didn't film a usable take until midnight. They came out with a total of 8 takes and filmed 7 of them in merely 5 hours from midnight to 5 a.m. I'm exhausted just thinking about that. I mean, the setup, the repositioning, holding for sound, or anything else that interfered with shooting, that's a lot. Any mistake made would force everyone to start from the beginning rather than from that point. Shushan chose to take the final product that would be the film. He chose the take that best represented the moment of Omer finding the other workers hiding in the freezer. That was the pivotal moment for him, and he knew that that had to be the focus of the film. And if you're going to remember one thing about the film, he wants you to remember that scene. And as I mentioned, it was the most striking thing I'd ever seen. More logistic filmmaking facts. I thought that outside to inside transitions were done in a solid way. I didn't notice a shake of any kind of the camera. Turns were smooth, which is important because sometimes you can see the camera get wobbly and it takes you out of the world that the movie created that wanted you to enter in the first place. It kind of brings you back to a reality in a not fun way. And it gives me a headache. I don't know if you find that as well. When I notice a camera shake or if I notice like an obvious glare from lighting, I'm just like, oh, come on. Come on, guys. There was no editing in post. What we saw filmed went straight from the camera to our screens. It's important to point that out because I would not be distracted from asking myself the film's main question. Who really is the bicycle thief? I'll let you think about that. I would recommend this movie to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. It is streaming on HBO Max for all who are interested. Stay tuned for the fourth segment.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Here we finally are at the fourth segment. First, thank you for listening all the way through. I really appreciate it. And I hope you've learned something or are inspired to watch these films that are world-class examples of filmmaking. To me, these films demonstrate that a movie can be made with any means you have. Two Distant Strangers and The Letter Room had a bigger budget, yes. There are names associated with these films who could garner these budgets pretty easily. They had popular music in it, and that doesn't come cheap. But you know what? They deserved it. They were good films. The other three, which were a bunch of nobodies, really, did the best they could and leveled up. And surpassed in some areas, I truly think. In the end, they ended up alongside each other as Academy Award nominees. Doesn't matter what you are, it's how you got there. That title of Academy Award nominee can never be taken away from them. No matter who wins tonight in this category, they've accomplished something hundreds of thousands of other filmmakers try to do as well. But the Academy saw and chose them specifically. They recognized the element that made them special and gave it a great and unique achievement that's wanted by all, but given to a few. So, kudos to them. And to all you aspiring filmmakers listening, it's okay not to have a lot of resources to make your film. Don't let it stop you. Here's some ways to get your ideas and gather the help you need. And as episodes come out more later on, I will keep adding to this list of ways that you as an independent filmmaker can get started on your film. The first resource I have in mind is Reddit. Reddit is a great site. It's a whole community of screenwriters on there that are posting updates on projects they're drafting, and there are those there to just give advice. There are people starting out, and there are people who have sold their script for a lot of money. So you've got everybody on opposite ends of the spectrum to ask your idea and advice to. So here's what I want you to do. Post your idea. Ask how someone who sold to a studio did it. The information's free on this thing called the internet. Use it. A website that funding can be made on is Indiegogo, and it's designed just for people who want to support filmmaking innovators and creative enterprises. So start looking around. Another little website is Production Hub. It can help you find people willing to work as crew for reasonable rates. To quote Mrs. Doubtfire, "Help is on the way, dear. You just have to know where it is." So draft the script idea that you wrote on the back of your CVS receipt that's been accumulating dust inside your car console. Figure out the heart and the message, and get to filming. We are waiting for your idea. We need it. Best of luck to tonight's nominees. I'll be watching and hope the one that I want wins, as we all do. Let me know what you thought. With that, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That would really help us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.